The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMSI.
Hi everybody, and welcome to Humanity First. This is Peter Evers, your regular host of the show. And this will actually be the second time that we've done a virtual town hall. So our guests today still maybe could be called guinea pigs. Thank you so much. We're going to do some introductions in a little while. And for those people who saw the first version of the town hall meeting, this really is a conversation. And today we're actually going to be talking about something which is very pertinent going on at the moment, and that is human rights. And not only human rights, but the history of human rights and some of the things that have happened over the past pretty much 70 years, as we were talking about a little bit before, Stephen, but specifically 35 years ago with the Americans with Disabilities Act and what's happened there. So we're going to review history, but we're also going to look a little bit about what the future holds for human rights and the dignity of human rights with a change in government and what that might mean and some of the proposed policies. So we're going to be rather sweeping today, but we have a great panel with us. So I'm actually going to start by asking our panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive right into our first question. So Stephen, can we start with you?
Stephen Saunders, on the White State Board of Human Rights, the Advocacy Board of BAMSI, and I've also served the BAMSI Human Rights Board a long time ago too.
Yeah.
And Nate, I pass it on to you.
Thank you, Stephen.
My name is Nate Hoover. I work for the Commonwealth in the Department of Developmental Services as a human rights specialist. And really what that means is I'm a supporter to the human rights system of safeguards for each of the citizens served by DDS and all of the staff that provide them supports. And I'm also a family member of folks with disabilities as well, both past and in the future, and probably a guardian someday, and love this work.
Thanks, Nate. Jenny.
Hi, my name is Jenie Shuney, and I am the Director of Program Performance and the Quality Improvement Department at BAMSI, but I am also the Human Rights Coordinator for BAMSI. I run two committees, one for our Brockton Human Rights Committee and the other for our Foxborough Committee. And our Human Rights Committee is very similar to kind of what Nate does for the state, where we are constantly looking for the human rights of persons served within BAMSI to be protected in various areas of their services and programs.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everybody. I think it's really important just to underscore the fact that we have a relationship with our funder. We have a relationship with DDS, which is fundamentally built on the idea of providing high-quality services for people, giving people every opportunity to reach their potential, while making sure that they are safe in the homes that we have. And it is a wonderful partnership. So I just want to thank you, Nick, for all of the work you do. And everybody who works for DDS, because I think our relationship is a fine one. So shout out to those folks as well. And Stephen, I want to thank you because I think you've been on this show about 4 times, so you're a little bit of an old hand at this.
Yes,
and
I am.
And every time I speak to you, I learn something, Stephen. You are steeped in history of I'm not saying you're old in any sense, I don't mean that, but your journey and your story have been such an illustration.
My journey from the nursing home to the group home.
Right, and let's get into that burst, but let's start by asking this question. It's 35 years since the ADA this year. If my math is right, is that right, everybody? I think it was maybe 36 years, because it was 1990 in July. And that was a really significant moment in our history when you look at upholding people's human rights and making sure that we were held accountable for making sure that we gave everybody equity and equality in terms of living. And I think there was when you think about what happened before that, there were pieces of legislation that sort of nibbled around the edges a little bit about human rights and about disability rights. Nate, maybe start with you. What is the significance of the ADA and all of that stuff that came before that?
Certainly. Personally, to me, the ADA is probably the most important piece of civil rights legislation in that it protects everyone. I think that human beings always have a way of sort of placing other people into categories and othering folks.
Yes.
But one overall shared experience is that of disability for the human being. And I actually consider myself and most people pre-disabled almost in a way, or non-disabled folks, because the likelihood of becoming disabled is sadly very high. A slip and fall, a car accident, and then all of a sudden you're the receiver of the human services that we're talking about. And so I think as a civil rights piece of legislation, this is one that protects literally everyone. That, along with the Supreme Court ruling around Olmstead, which provided all citizens with the opportunity to live in the community, to not be unduly institutionalized, enshrining that right to living in the least restrictive environment was crucial. So I think the ADA and Olmstead sort of knocked down a lot of the barriers that had been created prior to.
Yeah. It makes me think, somebody once said to me when I worked for the Department of Mental Health, nobody wants a lawsuit, and I thought, well, are you sure about that? Because it seems to me that might be one of the best ways of, as you say, enshrining the rights of people as we sort of go through, civilization, if you like. Jenie, do you agree with that? Is legislation necessary? Why can't we just work all this stuff out ourselves?
Oh, it's absolutely necessary. The ADA, well, we tried prior to the ADA, and it wasn't as successful because the ADA really gave teeth to making sure the federal government mandated that states and local governments had to give equal access to programs, services, facilities. It really made us look at society differently to make sure that everyone had no barriers. There was accessibility and inclusion. So the ADA really, with the federal government's backing, is what makes the states and the local governments kind of persist and follow through on what laws are passed and are saying that we should do. So it was really important that the ADA have that federal backing. I think that's what's most important, and I'm hoping that is something that will continue.
Yeah, which underscores the absolute importance of a federal government that listens to the people, because this was something the people wanted, and it's obviously something that the people still want. So woe betide a federal government who decides that this isn't important. Nate, I love what you said, and I feel the same way. I've worked in mental health for most of my life. It is unusual for a human being to go through the life cycle without being challenged in some way. I think about some of the acquired brain injury programs that we have, people who are one day driving down the road and they're in a car accident, or even playing sport or something like that. It could happen to us all. I love that sort of idea of pre-disabled, which is really I was thinking about this the other day, Stephen, and I think we talked about this, but I went to a funeral of one of our persons served, and everybody in the funeral home where we had the service was a BAMSI employee, and the love that was in the room was amazing about this gentleman who was 72 years old. Made me reflect a little bit about what was it like 72 years ago for somebody who was born with developmental disabilities. It was so different. And when I hear your story, what reflects in me is that we miss so much if we don't pay attention to the potential of every human being, which is the essence of that. I'd like you to tell that story a little bit, Steve, if you don't mind.
When I was growing up, when I was going to school, my mom even helped me to have special classes. When I was in junior high and high school, and but I still had other classes too. History, art, wood shop. I was with regular people, but it was great to be on my own too.
Yeah. One of the things that you brought tears to my eyes. And you've done this a couple of times. You made me cry a couple of times doing that. It's not going to happen today. Sure, maybe it will. But one of the things that you said to me once was that you beat hospice.
Yes, I did beat hospice.
Tell me a little bit about that, because that is such a strong story.
So, when I was in the nursing home, I said to myself, I want to get stronger. I studied the Bible. The Bible was like a book that helped me.
Mm-hmm.
And now, I'm here. The Bible has brought me more and more to being healthier.
Yeah, yeah. And when you said that originally to me, it was that you weren't given up on, that you.
I wasn't given up.
Yeah.
I had friends, I had family members that were backing me up, and cousins, aunts, uncles.
Yeah, and one of the things that puts emphasis on your story, which is amazing, your individual spirit,
Yes.
the way that you decided that you were going to take on the world,
Yes.
which is essentially what you did. You are now a person of a lot of significance within the sphere that you exist in terms
Yes.
of human rights. You are on the statewide.
I'm on
human
the
rights.
statewide. So how I got voted on, Nate was at one of our BAMSI Human Rights meetings, and we had to talk about persons served against sharp things. So I brought up several different ways of that person not getting hurt.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Nate says, well, Stephen, you're going to be on the wide state board, and next thing I'm on Zoom with him and with Joseph and Amy Boone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the other wide state board members from the other districts,
Just an amazing story. And I think, even last night, and I'll give this example, we had a wonderful person served advisory board last night. Food was good as well.
Yes.
And during it, we were talking about what we could do better as an organization, and we were looking at our opportunities.
Yes.
And we were talking about activities. So you mentioned your faith. Incredibly important to so many
Yes.
people. We are paying attention to that, getting people to places where they can celebrate their faith. But also, another skill.
I brought up getting the artwork out into the community from the day programs, and the art teacher I have, she wants to start art show to show what the disabled can do.
Yeah. So that was you. Thank you for doing that, because that was the story I wanted you to tell. But it's not about Stephen. It's about what Stephen wants for the community, which is just and that is the result of Stephen fighting that fight, and beating hospice, and just being available to other people. Which maybe we could just do a quick round robin, because I think this is an important question to a panel. It's no coincidence why you're here, but just in a few sentences, and Jen, maybe we'll start with you. Why is this so important to you?
Oh, it's so important because the world needs inclusivity.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes it so special.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has special talents. There's something unique about every person. And we don't want people discriminated against or marginalized and not included in society. The less we want our person served, anyone with a disability, out in the community seen. We want their artwork seen, but we want to see their faces too. We want them everywhere that we can be. We want them to be, because that's how the world should be.
Yeah.
And the more that we see that, it becomes normal and not seen as different. And that's the kind of world we need.
Yeah.
We need compassion and caring and inclusivity.
This like when we have our golf tournament, I'm out there, being supported by BAMSI, and I'm also supported through my volunteering too.
Yeah, you're always there. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And you also told a joke at the golf
I'm not
tournament.
telling that
We're
one.
not telling that. It wasn't risque, everybody. It was actually very funny. Nate, how about you?
I guess it started as a personal journey for me, I guess, getting into the field of human services. Ultimately, I guess, though, I believe that as human beings, we're all just kind of walking each other home. And then to take it to that next step, when you hurt, I hurt, and I don't want people to hurt. And as a student of history, I went to college and got my bachelor's in history, how I became a human service person. Here I am. But I've learned a lot from history, and the biggest lesson that I've learned is, well, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself. It often rhymes. And as someone who's studied the history of disability services, I've seen how dark that history can be, and think it's important that we safeguard from that. So that people aren't othered and then aren't caused harm by being placed in that other. So that's where I come from.
Are people being placed in a place that, the family is just going to leave them there and nobody will take care of them?
Yeah. So, Stephen, I'm asking you that same question as well, but I just wanted to sort of, the observation that I have from this is that the normalization of the human experience, the normalization of who people are. There are no two people unique. I remember there was a wonderful advertisement for diversity, equity, inclusion in Britain, and it was a fingerprint, and it just said, "Who's this?" I mean, we are so much more similar, and our families experience the same things. Obviously, there's a through line to why you care about this.
Yes, I do.
But many people might just stop there and say, "I'm going to advocate for myself." You advocate for the community. Why is that so important to you?
Because I want the community to see that they can advocate for themselves too. And if they don't advocate for themselves, someone's going to have to step up and advocate for you.
Yeah, and there are people that
do that.
Well, we have a lot of people who are nonverbal, for example.
Yes,
right?
we have a lot of nonverbal people that can't speak for themselves.
Right.
So somebody has to speak for them.
Right.
Out a staff person has to speak, or a guardian.
Yeah. It is wonderful to take life in the philosophy that don't start with what people can't do. I remember when I was learning about supported employment, and you don't say, "Oh well, there's a job down here that you go and do it." You say, "What do you want to do?" And even if somebody says, "I want to be a doctor," and there's a long way between that person's educational and being a doctor, you don't say you can never be a doctor, right? You say, "Well, let's see what we can do. How far can we go in this journey?" It's just a philosophical sort of thought that you kind of live every day, and I'm just really proud to be associated with you because you do it every day.
Yes, like sometimes the book I'm reading now, it's history, but it's about a president, and it's about Roosevelt, how he fought, his way through sickness.
Of course, yeah. Always reading.
Yes, I love it.
Always learning from history. Yeah, I love that. We have had a call in, and I think it sort of piggybacks on what you just said, but let's explore that in a moment. Yadia is asking, how can marginalized people advocate for themselves? Let's start with Stephen.
Well, there's the guardian, staff, doctors that can help. I'm trying to think.
Could you talk about caring force?
The caring force, the caring force, and the rally that we do down in Taunton too. Yeah. And I'm speaking again for the caring force. So I saw the dates. One is May 8th, and The 11th is a Sunday. No way we're going to travel to Boston.
It's April the 11th.
April?
Yeah.
Well, she had May.
Oh, really? Well, it's actually April the 11th, and that's the one that's in Taunton at the Clarion Hotel.
Yeah, but I saw I contacted person served and says, well, these are two wrong dates.
Yeah, we've got them right, but that I think is a wonderful idea. And if anybody has been to that, everybody wears the same T-shirt, which is the Caring Force one.
And I was bringing up at the advisory board last night, if we could have a shirt that says BAMSI here and then the Caring logo up here, and still have the big Caring logo on the back. That would be great.
Yeah, we're working on that, and that the Caring Force is really saying that the people who are doing this work deserve a wage which is sustainable, so they don't have to work 2 and 3 jobs.
The workers need a raise.
That's right, which goes directly to the level and quality of care and service that they're getting. Nate, what's your answer to Yadia?
I think it's a fantastic question. It's I think there are many, many marginalized groups, and I think the intersectionality and the combined needs of those marginalized groups working together are really the path forward. I love hearing about the Caring Force in particular, as sort of the lobbying group for the direct support professionals and human service workers. I think they do their own form of protection for our fellow citizens. So to me, it is banding together. Historically, we've seen that when marginalized groups band together and work together, that's often what holds back the tide of injustice. And so I think banding together is the start, and then it's seizing roles. So I'm a fan of thinking about what positions people fill in order to affect change. Stephen, you're a wonderful example. You filled the role of Human Rights Committee member and then statewide Human Rights Committee member. Those are huge. Your voice there has helped the entire group learn more, learn better.
But this is my second term on the co-chair.
Yep.
That's right. Anyway, Jen, what do you think?
Specifically, I talk a little bit about BAMSI. We have a structure. Every program has a human rights officer. That person served and staff can also talk to.
Co-chair.
That's right.
I was 5 years on BAMSI for co-chair.
Yes, and we also have a human rights committee, and there's chairs, but their committees are made up of
person served,
attorneys, clinicians, family members, advocates. We have partnership with the state, so we have human rights specialists that support us whenever we have questions, and they come to our meetings as well.
And we have a person that goes out to the programs to check on people.
Yeah, that's right. But there's also a lot of advocacy groups out there right now, and the internet is a really great place to find a group. And it can be a scary time right now with everything going on, and you want to feel like you are with those like yourself who are looking for that support, looking for that guidance. There's wonderful advocacy groups for every kind of, whether you're in ABI or DDS. There's many groups that you can join, and it's important to understand that you're not alone in how you feel, especially right now. And as Nate said, it'd be great if we could get all the groups together to advocate, but even if you can just find that one local group, whether it's virtual or with a provider like BAMSI, there's someone out there who can support you and advocate for you.
Yeah, I just want to go back to that issue of intersectionality, which is making sure that all people with disabilities are pulling together, are making statements about equity and justice, and Because sometimes you can be marginalized within the disability community. You know, I think about the trans folks in the LGBTQ Q plus community. You know, we all have to advocate for people. And when I think of Stonewall, Stonewall was actually, which recently had an anniversary, was actually started by by two trans folk. And so it really is important that we think about a group of people in a much more expansive way. And I suppose as we close, because believe it or not, we've nearly run out of time after about an hour, half an hour. The final question is, and it would be foolish not to recognize this, has been a change in government, and there is a different perspective around funding. There are possible cuts of about $880 million in Medicaid. The question is, and it's hard, I mean, I remain optimistic about this, but you can't be blind to the fact that there are possibilities of changes in services. And I suppose the question is, you know, what are you most worried about as we face this, and what can we do? We've already talked about advocacy, but what worries you most about these possible cuts in services?
I think what you just said is very important. It's we don't know what's coming, but not to be blind to it is really important. And I think it's a time for everyone to band together. Advocacy is going to be huge. And what's really important that we don't want to lose is if each state and local government has the opportunity to then decide on equal services for, you know, services, programs, and facilities, we want to maintain what we have and exceed that. Yeah. You know, believe some people might think, oh, what we have right now in our country is enough for people with disabilities. But if you're living with a disability, it's not. No. You know, they deserve more. And so what we don't want to do is go backwards at all.
Yeah, thank you. It's perfect. Yes.
Again, as a student of history, I've seen what happens when governments and societies start to value the dollar and efficiency in a way that rises higher than valuing each other as people. Yeah. We saw that in World War II. Yeah. We saw that through the Holocaust. I think education is important. Many of us aren't taught in our schools that prior to the Holocaust, it was disabled folks and gay and lesbian folks that were citizens in Germany that were the first victims of the Holocaust. Right. And so that piece of me that wants to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself really stands out here. When efficiency is the main goal, it's often the most vulnerable people who suffer. And so we've done a lot of work since the 70s to de-institutionalize human services here in Massachusetts as the Commonwealth, but across the country. But that costs money. And if we lose a good chunk of our funding, my worry is that we slingshot back to re-institutionalizing disabled people. Yep. And the reason we deinstitutionalized was individual rights are not able to be afforded in those types of congregate settings. And so I worry that we go back to where we were.
Yeah, and we cannot do that.
We cannot do that.
And we have to be loud. We have to be loud.
We have to speak.
Go ahead.
We have to speak for what we want and what we need to survive in the community.
Yeah. A lot of the things that we take for granted, like compassion for our fellow person and the ability of taking care of our most vulnerable folks, are somewhat under fire at the moment. So the louder our voices are, the more we prevail. The more groups who struggle, vulnerable groups who struggle, who are marginalized, who come together and fight that fight, the more strength there is. And your insights have been amazing today. Thank you so much. And you know, it's a reminder of how far we've come, which is wonderful. It's a reminder of how far we need to go, and it's also a reminder of what's under threat for us at the moment. We cannot be complacent. We have to plan for the worst. We have to hope for the best. And lobbying and making sure that the people that we elected in this government know exactly how we feel is imperative going forward. I want to thank you so much for coming on the town hall and making it such a success. Stephen, thank you so much. Nate,
thank you.
Jen, thank you so
you.
much. Thanks everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next week. Bye.